Welcome to The Way They See Us, Images of Spain from Abroad, a compilation of visions and depictions of Spain by artists and scholars who've devoted their professional and sometimes personal lives to Spain. As you know, Instituto Cervantes' mission statement is the promotion of the Spanish language and the cultures of Spanish-speaking countries. And this is what the whole program is about, talking about Spain's many different cultural expressions and art forms, but with a twist. Spaniards are more used to telling others what they are like, but I wonder what it feels like when it is somebody else doing the talking. How does that feel? Is it really easier to see the speck of dust in your brother's eye than the plank in your own? In this, our second chapter, we have Sephardic Persian flamenco dancer Leilah Broukhim, who's made an international name for herself in a traditionally Spanish art form, the world of flamenco. Leilah Broukhim was born and bred in New York and has been based in Spain since the year 2000. Let's see what she has to say about Spain. So Leilah, thanks for being here with us. I'd like to ask you a few questions now, if that's okay with you.
I'd love to, Richard. Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, it's an absolute pleasure. Let's see. How difficult is it not only to master, but to excel in an art form that is not indigenous to your own country of birth? I'm no expert whatsoever, but I can imagine there's more to it than meets the eye. It's certainly more than learning some steps and joining spins, turns, and arm waving together. There has to be a culture and a tradition to learn and deal with.
Indeed, Richard. Flamenco is a very, very complex art form, as you know, I'm sure. And when I was first put in touch with the art form, it was through the dance. The dance is what first kind of sucked me in, so to speak, attracted me to the art form. And I was very lucky because my Spanish teacher at the Lycée Français de New York, she took us to see a flamenco version of Medea with the Ballet Nacional de España in City Center. I have a very clear memory of it. It was Lola Greco dancing. And I was so thrown aback by the beauty of the art form, the music, the shapes and forms that they were creating, because I had done other styles of dance, ballet, tap, and jazz. So I started learning flamenco and very quickly realized that I had a knack for the rhythm, that it went very well with my my body shape and form. And so I advanced pretty quickly with the dancing, but it wasn't until I arrived to Spain in 2000, after I graduated. I studied film at Columbia University and I wanted to be a filmmaker, and then flamenco took over. So it wasn't until I came to Spain that I realized how diverse flamenco is, first of all, in terms of all the different aspects that you have to learn, not only the dancing, as you said, the footwork, technique, etc., but really, you really have to delve into the music. The cante is the mother of flamenco, the singing. And in order to be a good dancer, you have to know your cante, because it's through the dancing that you have to answer to the cante. So the singer sings to you and you have to respond. And also the guitar is also really, really important to know the different techniques of how to accompany, etc. And then,
oh, sorry. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so please.
No. I was just so excited listening to you, and I just thought, I mean, how? Okay, now you've got the attraction there, but how did you get started? I mean, how did you delve into that mysterious and mesmerizing world?
Well, first of all, you know, it was never my plan to be a professional flamenco dancer. I just wanted to learn as much as I could about flamenco. I was so fascinated by this art form. I didn't really understand why I was so attracted to it until maybe it was 7 years into living in Spain that I was put in touch with a Sephardic organization called Centro Sephardic Israel. And I started getting in touch with the Sephardic community in Spain. And I started studying and researching the origins of flamenco. And when I found out that there are very deep influences of Sephardic culture in flamenco, I kind of started realizing that maybe that was where the source came from of why I felt so connected to flamenco in my soul. But to answer your question of how I got started, really, all I was doing was studying. I was studying at Amor de Dios at the flamenco school in Madrid. I went down to Seville and studied intensely intensively with the Farruco family, and really just wanted to get as much information. I went to all the concerts, all the shows. Literally, it was tunnel vision, flamenco 24 hours a day. And then I got the opportunity to join a company in the States, Flamenco Vivo Carlota Santana, and they hired people from the States and also people from Spain. And that's where I started getting my professional knowledge on stage through that company. Really learned the do's and don'ts, and started to apply everything that I learned in a theatrical setting.
Okay, so I'm looking at your history, well, your recent history, and you've been living in Spain now since the year 2000. Exactly. I suppose the first question should be, why Spain?
Well, it started out because of flamenco. That was the main reason why I came to Spain and stayed in Spain, because I soon realized as I started advancing with the flamenco training, and then I started working more. I started working in the different tablaos in Madrid and Seville and Barcelona. And so I really, very quickly realized that this is the hub. The hub is here in Spain. All the musicians here are amazing. The teachers here are amazing, and also just other coworkers and people that you can learn from, not only from the dance, but also the culture in and of itself, which is very different than mine and the way that I was brought up. So basically, it started out because of flamenco, and then slowly that kind of morphed to me being very comfortable in Spain in terms of the Spanish lifestyle. I was born and raised in New York City, even though my family is Iranian and Sephardic, but I was a gung-ho New Yorker, really organized. I'm still very organized, which is kind of hard in Spain. I'm sure we'll get to that later. And really Spain helped me kind of ease this more, I would say, rigid side of myself in terms of like the American mentality. And the easygoing way of life really attracted me. And also, if I'm being really honest, it's much easier to make a living in Spain as an artist than it is in New York. In New York, you have to maybe work 2 to 3 jobs. I mean, my sister's an actress in New York, and she's also a Ayurvedic massage healer and therapist. And, she is constantly hustling. And I'm hustling here, but it's a different kind of hustle because I've never had to have, since I became fully professional. I mean, I taught English like most foreigners do when they come to Spain, until I entered my first company in 2003 or 4. And then after that, I never had a side job. Okay. And that's only possible, I think, in Spain, where cost of living is lower, where expenses are lower. And so it's much easier to make a living as an artist if you're, disciplined, I would say.
Okay, that sounds good. That'll give all of those people in Spain that are always complaining about everything a lesson that life is much easier, according to a New Yorker. That's very good. Listen, I've got a question, because of course, now that I think about this, it's just funny. I'm here in New York interviewing you, a New Yorker, and you're in Ibiza now, in Madrid.
Yeah.
Where are you right now?
I'm in Ibiza right now. Yeah, I moved to Ibiza.
I'm so sorry for you. I'm so sorry.
I know. I'm really sorry. Yeah.
Anyway, let me ask you this: what were your first impressions of the country when you got here, when you got to Madrid, and have these changed at all after 21 years now?
That's a good question. I think that I was surprised at how direct people were about things. I think people in the States are a little bit more PC, and here people are very open and are not afraid to tell you, what they think and how they feel about things. And so I was a little bit taken aback. I'll never forget one of my first days at Amor de Dios, the dance school. It was right after the summer. I think it was the end of August. And these two friends, I was waiting in the hallway, and these two friends saw each other and they were like, hey, how was your summer, speaking in Spanish. And then one of them was like, oh, I see that you put on some weight this summer. And I was, you know, shocked because in the States, nobody would make a comment like that. It would be totally uncool. And slowly began to realize that it doesn't come from a place of, you know, harm or anything. It's just kind of this more open, free way of speaking. And so that was kind of interesting to see the difference of culture. The other thing that I was, I don't know if it was like difficult or more kind of, I immediately saw the difference in terms of the different cultures in Spain. So, you know, obviously I come from New York, where it's just a melting pot of all different cultures that are more or less, I would say, integrated into society. And, you know, 20 years ago, now it's different, but 20 years ago, you know, I was living in Lavapiés, in a neighborhood where there were a lot of immigrants from, you know, Africa, Morocco, South America. And it wasn't, I would say it wasn't so, the cultures weren't so integrated into kind of general Spanish society. They were more kind of doing their own thing. And also the Gypsy culture, I was very wowed by their culture and how, you know, what a beautiful, amazing tribe they are. And so they are also kind of, you know, separated. They were separated. Now, again, now, you know, things are changing as first generation, you know, like Chinese, first generation Moroccans are now Spanish and they speak fluent Spanish. And so back in the day, I think that the general, and I'm speaking very general here, the general Spaniard was not used to being around different cultures and didn't have like a lot of knowledge then about who these people were, where they come from, what their cultures were from. And I also found personally that, you know, because since I don't look quote unquote American, then, you know, people, when I told them I was from New York, they were confused. And they were like, but you look Arabic. And I was like, well, my family is Persian, from Iran. And they're like, what, Iraq? And I'm like, no, Iran. And they're like, oh, so you're Muslim? And I'm like, no, I'm Jewish. So it was very confusing because they weren't really used to such diverse background, and also somebody who looks Middle Eastern like me, who is fully American, you know. And I would try to explain to them, I'm like, well, you know, being American is many different things. Right. It's not just, you know.
But at least let me say, Leilah, that you jumped into the very deep end of the pool there, because you went to Lavapiés, which is also like a melting pot within Madrid. I mean, it's not New York, obviously, but there is a great sort of combination of multiple races and ethnicities and everything. So,
I love Lavapiés. I mean, you know, back then it was, now not so much, but back then it was less expensive rent. It was close to the dance school. It was very centric. And, you know, I made so many amazing friends and really felt a part of the neighborhood.
So let me ask you at this stage something, because we're going to sort of add another element into the equation. Let's say, let's factor in something else. You're a woman, you're a New Yorker, you're, well, Sephardic Persian, you're a dancer, you're an artist, all these little things, which are huge, are very difficult when you enter a different context, a geographical context or a cultural context. And then we need to deal with the term acceptance. Acceptance, which can sometimes be perceived as a condescending term per se, but how does an outsider in the flamenco realm get accepted in what is the journey? What is the journey like? Do you ever get to be treated as one of them?
I often get asked that question. And again, things are very different now than 20 years ago. So when I first arrived, of course, there are many foreigners that come from all over the world to study flamenco, from Japan, from Israel. I mean, you name it, any culture, they're studying, because it really is an art form that touches so many souls around the world. But to jump from, you know, studying in a studio to performing in a tablao or performing in a dance company is a really huge leap. And it's not only about how well you dance, it's also about in the beginning, I wasn't very versed in terms of like, what I call camerino culture. So the dressing room culture among women, among the flamencas, it's a whole other world of communication. And I was a little bit innocent, and so I quickly learned how to, defend myself and ask the right questions, or listen and not speak. And really the key was to just be humble, and which I am still to this day, because I have so much respect for this art form, which isn't from my culture. And so I think that on the one hand, the art speaks for itself. So if you know what you're doing,
right,
then people will respect you. And also I have a style of dancing that's very flamenca, it's very traditional. And so I was very quickly accepted also among the Gypsy culture. And they are very akin to Judaism. They find similarities between the two cultures, as did I, in terms of family, respect for the elders, and tradition. So, and also, it's important to note that physically, I, quote unquote, played the part. I looked flamenca, I looked Spanish, and so that really helped me get my foot into the door. But that only takes you so far. It's like, and so really it was the hard work and the persistence, and also just being at the right place at the right time, being recommended from one place to another. I've been very blessed in terms of my professional growth.
And I'd love to hear your opinion on the audiences. because you've obviously performed in both places. You're talking about tablaos in Madrid, and you've probably done the same thing over here in New York, the States. So how can you compare your audiences in the US with those in Spain?
Yes. So in general, again, I'm speaking generally, Spaniards don't go to see flamenco in the tablaos. The tablaos are considered a more touristic venue, but little do they know that, top artists dance in tablaos. The same artists that dance in tablaos dance in the biggest theaters all around the world. And so that's kind of what's going on now, since COVID, is the struggle of the tablao, because the locals aren't necessarily going to support the art form. And I personally, I was just talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine from Jerez who lives here. We were listening to flamenco, and I was like, I'm like, flamenco is the most beautiful thing Spain has to offer, in my opinion. I'm just like, it's the most beautiful art form, the lyrics, the feeling, the sentiment, and it is, I would say, undervalued in Spain and more valued abroad. So abroad, I've traveled to many countries and all around the States, and people are always in awe. People who know about flamenco or people who don't know about flamenco.
You've just put the finger on the button there, because I want to ask you, do Spaniards in general really know about the origins of flamenco?
I mean, some of them do. But most people don't really know how deep it goes. Most people don't know that it has, as I said, Sephardic influence, Arabic influence, African influence, and the evolution of flamenco throughout the centuries. People kind of only know what's pop right now, and in terms of traditional flamenco, it's kind of considered. It's kind of in the background, and it's funny too, because I find that when I meet people from the South who don't really know a lot about that much about flamenco, but because they're from the South, they automatically appropriate that they do know about flamenco. And so the first question they always ask me is, what palos do you dance? What rhythms do you dance? And obviously, if you know flamenco, as a flamenco dancer, you have to dance all the palos. So that question in and of itself shows that is indicative of somebody who doesn't really know about flamenco, because if you did, you wouldn't ask a flamenco dancer, what rhythms do you dance? Because as a flamenco dancer, as I said, you have to dance all the palos.
From the perspective of a Sephardic Persian woman from New York, with a wealth of experience in Spain now, how can you compare the way Americans and Spaniards view the following concepts?
Okay.
View and value. Let's see, very quick. Time.
It's funny because I've recently learned the difference between linear and circular time. Okay. Linear time conceptually is, 1 hour after the next. And so 1 p.m. means 1 p.m. Circular time means 1 p.m. can be like 1:15 or 1:30, so it's more loose. And that's how I would compare the difference. So in the States, especially in New York, linear concept of time. 1 p.m. is 1 p.m. In Spain, the concept of time is more circular in the sense that, 1 p.m. can mean even a quarter to 2 or 2. Yeah. And that was hard for me to adapt to as an American, but I'm still learning. I'm still working on it.
Atta girl, you'll get it. Don't
worry.
Okay.
Not being punctual. Yeah.
Okay. Number 2, work ethics.
Work ethics. I would say in the States, there is a more disciplined, to use a loose term, work ethic, in the sense that, what you have to do today, you have a to-do list, you got to do it, or you got to be productive, or else you're a failure, which is also kind of negative in a sense because it puts a lot of pressure on people. And so there's plus and minuses to both things. And in Spain, I would say that things again are a little bit more circular, a little bit looser. If somebody says they're going to call you tomorrow, maybe they'll call you the next day or the next day. So if you're a little bit more structured in your work ethic, it can get a little frustrating. But you just got to learn to adapt. I mean, you're living in a foreign country, you have to adapt to their ways of life.
Sounds fair. And well, socializing, a lot of that you'll be able to, you must have experienced a lot of socializing. What's the difference?
Socializing, yes. In Spain, there's a lot of socializing. I would say the main difference between socializing in the States and socializing in Spain is that here it's much more spontaneous. In New York, it's like, oh, when are you free? I have time in like 2 weeks. I'm like, 2 weeks? I'm only here for visiting New York for 3 weeks. What are you talking about? And in Spain, it's more like, hey, what are you doing today? You want to meet up for a caña? You want to meet up for a drink? You want to meet up for a coffee? It's very kind of, somebody will like ring your doorbell. And obviously in New York, nobody will just like randomly ring your doorbell. And so I like that. I like that about Spain, that things are more, spontaneous and it gives way to more adventure.
Okay. And just one last question. What trait, what characteristic of the Spanish way of being would you recommend them to change or to tweak if you want? And what would you tell them they should be most proud of?
Let me think for a quick sec. Tweak, what I would tweak is commitment. I would tweak commitment. I'm very much a woman of my word. And so my word means, es oro, means gold. And so I found myself in many situations that that sometimes people are not that, it's kind of wavering. It doesn't mean that they're not going to stick to their word, but it could be now, or it could be in 2 months or 3 months. So things here are like less immediate, which you have to adapt to. But I would say commitment would be nice. A little bit more commitment would be nice. Okay, I hope I'm not offending anybody.
No, sounds good.
Well, you're Spanish, so as well.
I understand what you're saying, and I think you're totally right. Also, yes.
Okay, and the opposite is that I would say, in terms of like New Yorkers, what they can learn from Spaniards is to loosen up. It's actually two sides of the same coin. I think you just have to kind of find a balance between, being committed to your word and to your, to your actions, but kind of leave room for a little bit of improvisation. So I think that Spaniards are very good at improvisation, which is the heart of flamenco also, by the way, you know, improvising. And I think that New Yorkers can do with a little bit more improvising to kind of, you know, tone down the intensity a little bit and just let things flow better.
Wow, Leilah, it's been such a pleasure having you here with us today. Leilah Broukhim, ladies and gentlemen, all the best.
Thank you.